Hey everyone, it's Elon from the Egard podcast, and I'm here with Officer Dan, who graciously agreed to come on. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to give a quick background about yourself, kind of your experience and what you got going on?
My name's Dan. I work for Gainesville Police Department. I've been there for about 8.5 years. I was on our SWAT team for 6 years. I was our breacher, and then I was our point guy. And then now I'm an instructor on our emergency services team.
Wow, yeah, it's amazing. And you said you were on Survivor.
Yeah, I was on the 37th season of Survivor.
Badass.
Yeah, I've been blessed when it comes to all kinds of extracurriculars and whatnot.
Amazing. Well, I think for the sake of what we're going to go over today and what's kind of most pertinent and what's going on is there's obviously been an escalation recently, or building up slowly, but it seems like it's escalating more now with the police and kind of all these cases, these high-profile cases that are getting a ton of attention. This might be something you want to stay away from, and if you do, don't hesitate to say I just don't want to comment on it. But the Chauvin situation. Do you have any thoughts on kind of how it all played out? Do you have any?
So obviously he did something wrong. He did something he wasn't supposed to do.
Agreed.
Like he did not something just wrong. He did something absolutely terrible. Man, that's a tough. You just started right out of the box with some hard hitting stuff, man.
I figured, you know why? Because we're gonna go. So I'll tell you why. I'm not trying to put you in a corner or anything like that. The reason I jumped right into it is because it's, in my opinion, it is what happened in the Chauvin case is kind of the baseline. It's the precedent for everything we're going to see moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, to me, the hard thing is, like, people see that and they see what happened and they think that's a normal everyday thing in law enforcement, and it's not. That's such an anomaly. Like, I don't even think the word anomaly properly describes it. Like, that's something that's like once in a lifetime that happens. It's not normal, not by any case. And that's been the toughest thing to see is, everybody assumes it's a normal day. Everybody assumes that we all act like that and are going to do something like that. And we're just not. I mean, everybody who does this job, I don't know a single person. I know cops from all over the world or all over the country, and everybody signed up to do the right thing. Everybody signed up to help people and to save people. Nobody signed up to hurt anybody. I don't go to work every day and be like, I can't wait to put my uniform on and hurt somebody. Like, that's not the thing. And so that to me, other than Mr. Floyd losing his life, I was like, that's probably the worst thing that came out of that, was just the perception that we just are out there to hurt and kill people.
I'm happy you said that, and I'm glad the conversation went in this direction, because, like, I always repeat to people, there's over 60 million police interactions every year. There's close to 900,000 police officers. That is the first time I've seen a video like that, in my life. And it's like, regardless of how you feel about the outcome of the verdict, maybe we should stay away from that topic. But in the end of the day, I'm more interested because, the verdict is the verdict. It is what it is. Agree or disagree. It's kind of irrelevant. I think what's most relevant is how people watching move forward with how they perceive police. Like, that's my goal in all this, is to bring on good police officers, to show them that the overwhelming majority of police officers are like you, who are good people who put on their uniforms to help people. And that this is, like you said, such an anomalous thing. Have you personally felt that kind of change in people over the past couple of years in terms of being a police officer and how you're looked at?
A little bit. Honestly, I'm lucky where I work. I work in Gainesville, Florida. It's a college town. And we have a really, really good relationship with all of our community. So it's not been too bad. I mean, we have people that obviously come and try and start stuff with us. I had a kid come to me. So we have the bar area for college kids. It's called Midtown. I was down at Midtown for bar closing. We just hang out there. And this kid just walked up to me. He goes, "Do you know the difference between a taser and a gun?" And I'm like, come on, man. Like, I was like, just, you have a good night, and that's, it's a tough thing. We're lucky, but I know I've talked to other people that work in other places that deal with it a lot. And it's definitely changed from when I've begun, but it's not the drastic change that I feel like it's happened at other places.
Yeah, it really. I just did an interview with a police officer, and I didn't post it because he said that like they actually burned down a cop's house near
Oh
where he
wow,
lives.
wow.
And he was like, you know what? It's just not worth it. He's like, I just want to stay out of it. And I was like, man, it was a really good interview. You're a good person. It would be nice for people to see you. But that's where we're kind of headed.
Yeah,
Um,
it's we're almost like need secret identities almost.
yeah, I mean, that's
Like,
why I asked you. Remember, I was like, how do you want me to introduce you? Because it's like
oh
some police officer, but
yeah,
you're kind of in the public already.
yeah.
Um,
I don't do much, and honestly, I know I do a good job when I go to work, and I know I treat people well. I've had many people that I've taken to jail and, foot chases and fights and stuff like that. And they're like, thank you. I'm like, for what? They're like, you could have really, treated me a lot worse or hurt me more or this, that, and another. And they're like, thank you, because, you know, they understand. This is a weird thing. Like, I feel like most cops understand it. A lot of your criminals, the people that are regularly doing it, they understand, sometimes it's the cost of doing business. So for the vast majority of those interactions, they understand, if you get caught and you fight, like, and something happens, you get tased or whatever, like, it is what it is. That's just the cost of doing business. Like, that's a lot of what I've experienced, if that makes sense. Like, it sounds weird to say out loud, but it is what it is. A lot of people understand that the criminals that they do it all the time. Maybe that's the old timers. Maybe it's not the newer generation of people that are getting into crime and stuff like that. It's a weird time right now.
well, I do find that what's happened, which is kind of scary, is that there's now entitlement. We're teaching people to not obey police. We're teaching people to like, hey, you should kind of talk back to police. You should, like this kid who came up to you and said, do you know the difference between a taser or a gun? I can promise you, if I'm sitting in a bar with a tank top, I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I can look relatively intimidating with a shaved head. Let's say he's not coming up to me and opening his mouth at me, but he has
No.
confidence to open his mouth to police officers, which speaks
Yep.
volumes about the supposed fear, right? If police officers were this menace to society, like some of these people claim, where's the confidence? I would not walk up to someone who's armed if I was genuinely scared of them to go talk crap to them. I just wouldn't
No.
do it.
It's the strangest thing. And man, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, you're right. It's the strangest thing. We're painted out to be these terrible people, and you can't talk to us, or you're going to get beat up, or this, that, and another. And like, it was a young African American kid, like in college. Like, those are the people that we target. And this, that, and another. And this kid just walked up and asked me this question, and it's the strangest thing, man. It's weird because when I first started, long time, it hasn't been that long, but for me, it's been a long time. Like, it wasn't like that. Like, people didn't walk up and talk smack to us like that. They'd walk up and have a conversation. It's weird.
I'll be honest with you. Like I was kind of sucked into that anti-cop narrative for a while. And it kind of took, actually, interesting enough, the George Floyd case is the one that maybe opened my eyes the most, because I was so angry after the George Floyd thing that I actually
Yeah.
went and started researching all the numbers and was like,
Yeah.
okay, I have to separate myself from the feeling of what that video made me feel versus the reality of situations. Which is that, the vast majority of police officers are good. Um, in terms of moving forward, do you feel like a lot of police officers are kind of starting to step down, that they're starting to not feel comfortable doing their jobs? That, I mean, I spoke to a few cops who are like, we're being told to police less. Like, don't, if it's like a minor situation, don't get involved, just stay out of it. Don't escalate situations.
Yeah. A lot of agencies are telling their people that because they don't want to be involved in some type of lawsuit. It's just easier for them to let crime run rampant. And some people see it as, I've heard this term literally my whole career, the pendulum that swings back and forth. And right now it's very high on the, we hate the police, don't let the police to do anything. Eventually it's going to have to come back. My agency went through a phase where they were like, yeah, we're not, don't stop cars, don't take people to jail, don't do this, don't do that. And I'm like, hold on. I was like, time out. Like, I didn't sign up to this job to sit in a car, drink coffee, get fat, maybe go to the gym every once in a while, like, and go when I'm called. I was like, I did sign up to do this job to help people by taking bad people to jail. That's not the only way we help people, but that's one of the proactive ways we can help people. Luckily for us, we got a new assistant chief. He worked here back in the 90s and 2000s, and he was a captain when I first started. He left, and then he came back as assistant chief. And he's like, nah. He's like, we're taking people to jail. That's what we do. There's bad people doing bad things. we're going to go find him. We're going to take him to jail because that's our job. That's what we're here to do. And if not, crime's going to run rampant in our city, and we're not going to allow that in our city. I see a lot of other agencies, they're being told, yeah, don't do anything. You know, a lot of cops are stepping away. You know, we've had a lot of people retire and leave over the last few years, you know, either retire, quit law enforcement altogether, or go somewhere else. I don't know. For me, I follow a lot of police pages on Instagram and Facebook, and they always say, you know, remember when times are hard, remember why you signed up to do this job. So for me, I signed up this job to ultimately help people, you know, whether that be calls of service, you know, going out and finding bad guys. And I just can't do it. I just can't walk away. You know, I don't know. It's, I keep saying this, but, you know, I think it's just, you know, watch the news. It's a weird time for law enforcement. You know, a lot of people they're scared to do proactive police work because they don't want to be the next person on the news. They don't want to be the guy that LeBron James blasts on his Twitter account.
Well, the craziest thing about that, and I've mentioned this in a few other interviews, is that girl was actively trying to stab another girl.
Yes.
So what kind of policing could exist? And I'm hearing this is something that drives me crazy. So the problem is an uneducated population in terms of confrontation. And I don't mean uneducated. Anyone who's listening, I'm not saying you're uneducated if you don't know this, but unless you've been in high stress situations, unless you've gone through military training and then been in an active situation, unless you've been a police officer, or unless you've been attacked with a knife and had to fend off the person, or unless you're like a combat athlete who's been training people and you've been in the cage, you know what I mean, and you've sparred a lot, you can't understand those split-second high stress situations. You cannot stop somebody by shooting them in the leg or shooting in the air. Like some politicians have actually claimed, or use your taser. If you tase someone who's in the process of lunging to stab someone, they will manage to stab the person. It will not stop them. If you shoot them in the leg, they will still manage to stab the person. I just want to clear this up for everyone listening. If you shoot a warning shot in the air, that bullet, number one, is coming back down. So that's a problem. And number two, you will not stop them in that fraction of a second where they're actively in the process of stabbing someone from stabbing that person. And how do we know this? Because the day before the Ma'Khia Bryant shooting, a 13-year-old girl stabbed another 13-year-old girl in the neck and killed her because police couldn't make it there in time. So there's your proof. Everyone's saying shoot her in the leg, taser. It's this is the great problem with modern day society. We're putting these expectations on police where there's no accountability for the person actively stabbing someone, and giving full accountability to police officer to not only de-escalate a situation that has already escalated beyond de-escalation, but
that's why we're there.
It was called because, it was called for that reason. But then we're also telling the officer you're not even allowed to use deadly force. There should never be deadly force use, even when someone's in the process of stabbing someone. I just don't get it. So I wonder from a police officer's perspective, when you hear that, that's got to be scary, because you're like, what do I do now if I'm in that situation?
I mean, it is scary, but really you have to do some soul searching for that one. So for me personally, it's, you know, so SWAT in our emergency services team, what we're taught priority of life. Priority life is our victims, innocent bystanders, us, then our bad guy. Priority one's the victim. Priority one's that person getting stabbed. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to save them. You know, and that's really what it boils down to. It's really about your conviction and how committed you are and being in law enforcement and doing whatever you have to do to save somebody. So for me, it's, you know what, I'd rather be, you know, what is it, tried by 12 than carried by 6 or something along those lines. Like,
that's the famous.
I'll go through that. It is what it is. You know, it's going to suck. Don't get me wrong. But you know what, in the end, I saved that person's life and I did the right thing. And that's what I pull. It's funny. I go to my sergeant on a regular basis and be like, hey, I might have violated a little bit of policy, but I did the right thing. I helped that person out. And he's like, all right, cool. Like, it is what it is. So that's really what you have to, it boils down to for me. It's doing the right thing.
I mean, so, my fear is that it puts out in a certain amount of officers, there's 100% of officers. My fear is that the publicity over that case, and LeBron James, who's a powerful figure, saying you're next, which could easily be interpreted in numerous ways. But that's, you know, politicians coming out now, the news, the way they reported it. This guy's family could potentially be under attack. I wonder if that puts a certain degree of doubt in a certain number of police officers' heads of what they will. In other words, when that situation arrives again, which it inevitably will, how many officers are going to, for a split second, be like, I don't want to go through this?
A vast majority will. Absolutely. Because nobody wants to be that guy. Nobody wants to be that guy plastered on Twitter by LeBron James. Nobody wants to be that guy plastered on Fox News and CNN for doing the wrong thing when they know in their heart of hearts that they did the right thing. It makes you second guess yourself. And I feel bad for that guy in Columbus, Ohio. He's going to be second guessing that decision for the rest of his life because of all the turmoil that he has to be going through right now. He's being blasted by LeBron James. Like, that would be tough to deal with. And then that incites riots. And nobody wants to be that guy. So absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to cause other certain officers to second guess themselves. We second guess ourselves enough as it is. But then when you have such a high profile person like that blasting you on Twitter,
and politicians and the media and news sites. I mean, it's not just LeBron James.
That's just the high profile. That just is.
Well, that's dangerous because that's a guy with millions of followers. Now, in all fairness, I do feel like the response to this, as crazy as it is obviously there are certain people across the board speaking out and saying, no, guys, we need to calm down. It was just, there is some hope because I did see even Cuomo and Don Lemon were like, listen, if that's my daughter and she's actively being stabbed, what the officer did is save my daughter's life. We have to know when to. I was very surprised. So there is I feel like there is some degree of rationale left.
It's a very, for the most part though, it's a silent group of people. They don't normally speak out. That's the tough part, is those people that are on the side of law enforcement, agreeing with law enforcement, they don't speak out very much. And so that makes it tough. This job is mentally taxing. And then when all you hear is negative, and then the people that are backing you are they're kind of silent just because that's just those kind of people. It's tough. It's hard. I know I went through a phase last year when everything was going on where I was like, I can't even open Facebook anymore. Like I had to take off from social media for a while because it was gut wrenching. It would just put me in a dark hole on a regular basis.
It's interesting. One of the things that I researched when I started getting into all this was the amount of PTSD, the amount of suicide, the amount of alcoholism, the amount of problems that police go through prior to society turning on our police. And I always tell people like, I'm scared to so we get a lot of emails from my company because we're so public about it. They're like, I'm really proud of what you're doing. I just could never do it. I'm scared. I don't want to have, I have a family, I have this, I have a business, I have this, I have that. And I'm like, you know what? But it's that mentality that has allowed on numerous subjects a fringe percentage of the country to take complete control of the country because everyone is just bullied into silence. The only people who still have guts are the actual people out there still doing the job. You said it's mentally taxing. I can only imagine how mentally taxing it is prior to added stress of having to come home and worry about your family because society's turning on you.
Oh yeah.
Then you add that factor on top. I always tell people like that's going to increase negative outcomes between civilians and police officers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard enough. So I grew up in a law enforcement family. My dad worked in corrections for 20 years and, he worked in law enforcement for 11. So I've been around it and, it's taxing, just even going out to dinner. I want to face the door. I want that spot way back in the corner so I can see everybody, see everything. I go into Walmart or Publix or wherever with my kids and my head's on a swivel the whole time. It's stressful and it's that much more, for me, kind of like we talked about a little bit, I'm somewhat of a public figure kind of. So like people know who I am and the people that I arrest and take to jail, it's easy to find out who I am. And I live in the town that I work in and I go places in the town that I work in. So it's like, I don't even feel comfortable going out and like drinking, sitting at a bar in the town that I work in because it's like, God, I don't want to run into somebody that I've taken to jail or, they may hate me, and then, I have to worry about who I'm with. It's a lot, and it's gotten that much worse. That was ingrained in me as a kid, being around my dad. And now that I'm doing it myself, it's even worse. And then after all this stuff, it's even that much worse than that. It's more than just you put on the uniform, you go home, you take it off and you're done. It's 24/7. Unless you're at home sitting by yourself or sitting with your family and close friends, like you're always on, not quite in green light. You're kind of like in a red light or yellow light area.
It's I spoke to a police officer a while ago who was like telling me how he was in a situation where like there was an abuse to a child and the child died when they got there, and he was like trying to save the child. And I was like, and he's like, people don't realize, he's like, they always say, well, you signed up for the job. Well, you signed up for the job. Too bad you signed up for the job. They're like, they don't realize what that actually means. Like I always tell people, like, yeah, they signed up for the job. I'm like, and so do our soldiers. And so these, and we got to appreciate the fact that people are signing up for this job. It's not so, it's like, people are like, well, they chose to do it. Yeah, they chose to have to be there in that situation because no one else wants to. No one
Right.
else wants to pick up the pieces of a child's body. That's the honest to God's truth. It's terrible. It sticks with you. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen it. I've seen bad traffic accidents. I saw a girl get ripped apart. I wouldn't want to be the one dealing with the family and picking up the parts. And it was stuck with me when I saw it there one time. Imagine I had to see that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you know more than I do. I'm not saying like
It's tough. It's tough to get through that. It makes officers develop bad habits. You know, the drinking, the alcoholism, the suicide. You know, we had more suicides in law enforcement, more suicides than officer involved or officers being shot on duty.
mm-hmm.
A couple years, it's gotten worse. Man, this is a tough topic. You know, the hardest part I feel like in law enforcement is because you're supposed to be there, and you know it's that expectation that you're supposed to be there and you're supposed to help people. And the hard part is reaching out for help yourself. I know for me, you know, I'm lucky. I have a really good support system. My sergeant, he's one of my closest friends. Little story, I can talk about it now. Last year for me, I went through so many traffic homicides. It was a running joke with my lieutenant. If I ever get in a crash, even if it's a fender bender, Dan, don't show up. It got to October. I had 2 in one night, and one of them was early on in my shift. These kids hit a car or hit a tree. It was 2 like juveniles, got ejected. Car. It was bad. I was somewhat okay. Like I don't do well with kids stuff. I have 2 kids of my own, so like I'm very empathetic person. So like I struggle with that, you know, with children stuff. And I've worked day shift for 1 year, and I was like never again because it was just too much with stuff with kids. And then I had another THI later that night. So the THI is a traffic homicide investigation. And my sergeant called me. I'm driving home. He's like, "You good?" I was like, "Yeah, man, what's up?" He's like, "I could tell on the radio you're not good." He goes, "How about you don't come to work tomorrow night? You take your own time." And that's a key, is having a good support system, have good leadership in your agency to take care of you and stuff like that. Because that stuff is, you know, we're not built to see those kind of traumatic incidents over and over and over again. And when you do it, it really takes a toll on your soul, man. Like, whew, stuff's rough. I'll get off of that for a minute.
Well, you know, it's just so important for other Leos to be able to hear, like, you got to go get help, because I think a lot of them, there's like this mentality of be tough, tough it out. And
Yeah.
that's why you turn to all these other things. And I've been trying to, that's one of the main things I've been trying to raise awareness of. It's healthy to go talk to someone. It's healthy to admit that these things are not normal. It doesn't make you weak. You know, there's no human being in the entire history of mankind was designed to see that kind of stuff over and
Right.
over and over.
And so makes me kind of excited because this has been, the mental health aspect's been a big thing in my life lately. Taking care of me, helping take care of my guys. So like I actually bought a book about police burnout, you know, a very small niche topic in mental health. The only one I could find was published in 1987. Like that's how small it's about. But, you know, it's a culture thing. It's a culture in law enforcement to be like, no, I don't need help. I'm good. I got this. And that's what eats people up. It's a very old school mentality. You know, my dad, you know, I talked to my dad about some stuff I was going through. I was like, I'm thinking about going and seeing our head doctor. He's like, nah, fuck that. Don't do that. Can I cuss on here?
Yeah, of course you can.
He's like, nah, fuck that. Don't do that. You're good. He goes, they're going to tell you can't work. I'm like, dude, I was like, I'm struggling, man. Like, seen some stuff. Like, it's been a rough year. Like, home life, everything. It's been tough. And he's like, nah, fuck that. He goes, I'm good. You're good. Just talk to me. I got you. I'm like, Dad, I was like, I feel like I need to talk to somebody else. So it's just it's a very old school mentality, and it just gets passed on from generation to generation. And that's thing we have to break in law enforcement as a whole is being able to be open and be vulnerable. Like, I'm not saying like, let's get on the news and talk about, I'm hurting, like blah, 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 like, but we can talk to each other and be there for each other, not judge each other. And like, that's a culture that I've been trying to bring it. I'm starting with my shift. After an incident happens, like I like to go to some of my guys and be like, hey man, you good? You need anything? Just kind of open that door and let that be there and be like, hey, I'm here for you. Make sure that I'm not a supervisor or anything, but I'm like the most senior guy on my shift or a very young agency. So I kind of take it upon myself to be like an in so facto supervisor, I guess. But it's a culture, man. It's so toxic. In law enforcement, sometimes like we don't, instead of taking care of each other like we should, we tend to try and tear each other down to make ourselves look better. So that's something that I've been really pushing is taking care of each other and making, you can have a moment, like it's okay, like here, I got you, like it's good. You need to go do something, go get you a cup of coffee, run home, whatever, you had a rough call, I got you. Like I'll take care of the rest of your calls from, like, I'll cover your zone. It's not a big deal. Like check out, I'll take care of you. And it's just being there for each other and not passing on this tradition of a toxic culture where it's like, no, I'm Billy Badass. Like I got this. I don't need anybody. I can take care of it. And it's so bad, man. It's so bad.
Well, again, there's a reason why that exists. It's because of the utilitarian function of police, right? So it's a job where if it's going to work, at least historically, you have to be able to push through at certain times. And so, but what happens is sometimes that mentality or that virtue, which is a very valuable virtue, that's fortitude, right?
Yeah.
I don't care what you're going through, you have a job to do. It's military mentality. You do it. Right now you do it. You worry about whatever you're going through later.
Yeah, absolutely.
The problem is that we as a society, and I think law enforcement as a concept, never really moved to the later part where we say, okay, you did it, you made it through it, but now let's talk about where you need to be okay to do it next time again. I think that's the missing component right now in training, in how we perceive police. Because again, it's that same mentality. You signed up to do the job is how society sees it. And then in law enforcement, tough it out. You know what I mean? The perspective, you're getting tough it out and you signed up to do the job. You just saw multiple homicides or multiple deaths in one night that affected you. That's not something you just walk away from and then tough it out. So, I mean, I don't know what the solution to that is. I don't know why an organization, maybe there is organizations out there that are doing stuff.
There are some, there's like a suicide hotline that's like strictly for law enforcement and that you can call.
That's not enough. You're already suicidal. Why don't we help you? Sorry.
Yeah. So there's some agencies. So our agency has this thing, it's called the SISM team. I was working on a new project, so I actually missed the put in the date for it, like put in the application for it. But the SISM team, the whole concept is when there's a major call, a tragic incident, there's this team of guys, they're well trained and they just call people, hey man, you good? You need anything? Like, and it's just, I feel like that's something that's needed absolutely everywhere. And I know it's not absolutely everywhere. I'm blessed. I work at an agency that's kind of ahead of the curve. But that's still, in my opinion, that's not enough. That's just, we need something where we take care of each other nationwide and make it known that we're not these robots that society thinks or expects us to be. Everybody expects us to be like those cops. You remember that old movie with Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone, The Demolition Man? Like that's what they expect it to be. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely asinine. And like just be not phased and have like this thing and just, it is what it is. Like we go with things, but that's just not, we're people too. And that's what people seem to forget, that we're more than just the badge and the gun and the vest and all this. We're people and we're affected by the things that we deal with at work, and not only are we affected by the things we deal with at work and we bring it back home, we're also affected by the things at home and we bring it to work. And, it is what it is. Like it's going to happen. We're human. It's tough.
That's the whole thing that bothers me when people are, I had a conversation with someone who actually emailed our company. He's very reasonable, has conversations with me now, but he kind of like came out hot out the gate. He's a very good guy. He's a veteran. And he told me, he's like, I don't believe that the defund police movement actually wants to defund police. But I'm like, but look at the amount of funding that's now gone away from police since the movement started. And I'm
Mhm.
like, if anything, if you want to solve a problem, I went to a rough high school, right? The high school
Okay.
didn't get better as the government removed funds. The high school got worse. We had more violence, more problems until it eventually shut down. That was the
Yeah.
inevitable result of the defund my school movement, was the shutting down of my school. You're not going to solve the problems we're talking about by taking money away from police. You're going to solve money by putting money into these programs, into these things, and making it federal so that it goes. Or I don't necessarily mean it has to be federal, but each law enforcement agency should have this in place. I don't think it has to be managed by the federal government.
Right.
States can manage it, whatever that is. Local law enforcement can manage it, but they need the money to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a tough question unless you have something you want to say on this.
Go ahead.
In terms of how communities now, because of the narrative, are so scared of police. Like, you know how so police are now scared, but on the other hand, we do have a lot of minority communities that genuinely believe that their lives are in danger every police encounter.
Yeah.
Statistically not true.
True.
It's statistically the chance of being unarmed, not committing a crime, and compliant, regardless of your skin color, is lower, and being killed by a cop is lower than being struck by lightning multiple times. I've done the statistical analysis of it. It's almost impossible. It is almost impossible to be unarmed, compliant, and not actively committing a crime and be killed by a police officer.
Right.
There are situations where it happens, which is very tragic, but it's very, 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 very rare.
Right.
What is the solution to that at this point? At this point, it's like you have an entire community or entire segments of the population who are literally believe they meet you, oh, you're going to kill them, or your goal is to kill them.
So I think there's a couple of things that go into that. Our society and our culture and our nation has to change a little bit. The narrative that's pushed out has to be changed a little bit. No, that has to be changed a lot. Both of those things have to be changed a lot. So I feel like, I don't know of any instances where that's happened, where somebody's complied. I can think of one, but the cop just like totally foobarred the situation.
Philando Castile, in my opinion, he was armed, but he was legally armed.
Which one?
Was the guy in his car with his girlfriend and his baby girl was in the back seat, and it was the officer was Asian, pulled him over, and he said, "Officer, I'm armed." And I don't remember what happened. He was like, "I'm gonna reach for my wallet," and the cop still shot him. He's like, "It's a legal gun."
The one I can think of is like the cop calls the guy out of the car. He pulls him over. He does a traffic stop. He calls him out of the car. He's like, "Where's your driver's license?" The guy's like, "Oh, it's in the car." He's like, "All right, go get it." And then the cop just starts unloading on him. I'm like, what in the heck is going on?
Yeah, there are these rare. There's the one where the guy had "you're fucked" on his gun, and the guy came. There was a call that they said he was armed. He wasn't armed, and the guy's like, "Get down on your knees, up on your thing." And the guy's like, just his pants are falling up. He's like, "Walk forward." It was impossible. The commands were impossible, and his pants are falling down. He just reaches to pull up his pants. The guy like unloads an entire clip on him.
I think what we need is people to come to our defense. That silent majority, like they got to speak up.
That's the problem.
And until that happens, we're not going to have the support that we need, whether it's funding or people understanding that we're there to actually help. There's so many great cops like doing great things in their communities and building that trust and building those relationships. But that's the stuff that's not talked about. The only thing that's talked about when it comes to us is what we do wrong. Every single time it's what we do wrong. It's what we do wrong. It's what we do wrong. It's never right. And even when we do the right thing, it's nitpicked. But those are the things that are talked about. So, in my opinion, for that kind of stuff to change, it's a huge culture change, and the narrative just has to be spun the proper way. That whole incident that happened in Columbus last week, the narrative was cop shoots 16-year-old black girl. Where's the rest of it? And everybody jumped on the bandwagon before the truth was put out there. And honestly, a little bit of side note, their chief, I would love to work for that guy. Oh my God. That night he puts out the body cam footage. But anyways,
yeah, he did not wait. And then they got mad at him for putting out the footage. He's like, well, then don't accuse us of doing something right. He was really hard about it because they were like, how dare you? She's a little girl. You're showing her death. He's like, you guys are the one who put out the narrative. It's our job to protect our police officers now.
He did the right thing. And he's
absolutely
he's being scolded for lack of a better term. Like he's being crucified for doing the right thing because he released the footage. Like, we're damned if we do, if we damned if we don't when it comes to releasing body cam footage. And like, he's like, my guy didn't do a damn thing wrong. Like, here it is. Watch it in full speed. Oh, here it is in slow motion too. So you can really see what happens, and
then the neighbor had a different angle.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it's so undeniable.
Yeah.
But
And
sorry, go ahead.
But the narrative is the narrative is so bad, and everybody wants. It's like we have to have this public enemy, and the cops are really easy. We're the face of the government. I work for Gainesville Police Department, but I'm the face of the national government. And everybody hates me if they hate the government. You know what I mean? And like, it's not me personally, and I get that, and that's why I just try. I do my best to not let it affect me because I know it's not personal. But we're the, for lack of a better term, face of the franchise. If you hate the Bucks, you hate Tom Brady just because. We're those people, and the narrative has to be the big thing. People have to start pushing out that we're not the bad guys. We're trying. Like, yes, there are people who do bad things in law enforcement. Yes, there are people that make mistakes, but by God, they're mistakes. That's what happens, and that's just not the stuff that's pushed out there on the media. It's only negative. And I feel like if that were to change, it's not going to completely change the idea that people think that we're out to hurt them or we're out to get them, or if they have an interaction, they're going to get hurt. It's not going to completely change it, but it's going to put those gears in motion to start that process where this isn't a fix that's going to happen overnight. This isn't going to fix that's going to happen in my lifetime, more than likely, or your lifetime. Like, this is a long-term problem. People hating law enforcement has been going on, as long as law enforcement's been around. It's just the times that we live in with social media and everything, and the news just jumping on things before there are any facts. It just makes it that much worse, and it's more well known. I think that's really what it is. Everybody can talk on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter about how they hate the police, where 10, 15 years ago they couldn't do that.
I think it's even deeper than that. I think it's that people can no longer separate an instance. This is across the board for things, right? We're just become a generalized society. We need immediate results. So we can't separate. So we see one situation, we conflate it to the whole. It's actually where bigotry and racism comes from, right? So so we put out this video showing all the good stuff cops do. You know what the response is? Well, what about all the bad stuff they do? And I'm like, well, you see, this is the problem. Because if this is the entirety of what police do, this is how much is good, this is how much is bad. You're telling me that I have to, because I made this video showing this is what's relevant. This tiny little fraction of the 100%. Now, if we did that with any nationality, if we did that with any religion, if we did it with defining, any group of people, if we said, well, we can't talk about all the good, all the lives saved, thousands and thousands and thousands of lives saved, actually arguably much more, because a society without police, without you guys out there, would be hundreds of thousands of people potentially. It would be chaos.
It would be nuts.
But we can't talk about it because this 0.0001% of officers who are caught on camera doing something terrible represent now everything. And until the whole system is corrupted, the whole thing is broken, and it's like, well, that's an impossible standard, because if I use that standard for doctors, where there's 600,000 malpractice cases a year or something crazy like that, if I use that standard for any profession, it would be an impossible, and we're using that to perpetuate fear on all of society.
But what's crazy is, like, you talk about it and they're like, oh, but police officers are special. Like, there shouldn't be this small portion of people that are bad doing in law enforcement. That's like, when you bring up your argument, like their rebuttal is, there shouldn't be that small percentage. It's like, how are we supposed to weed these people out? Like,
you should always be, this is such a ridiculous argument. You should always be striving to be better. Yes, you're right. There shouldn't be. There also shouldn't be cancer in the world. There shouldn't be wars. There shouldn't be, like, we've disconnected ourselves from reality. There shouldn't be racism. Like, that's why what people are now doing is taking an impossible standard, and they're taking these small cases to justify their impossible standard. and they're conflating it to everything. And they're saying that everything is now systemically racist. Everything is now distorted. Everything is corrupted. And it's become an impossible situation. And this is my fear. The very communities that people want to help, like if I saw a video on, it was like, I don't remember what it was on. It was like Cut or Vice or something. And they're like, families have the talk. Parents have the talk. And I was like, what is this? So I go in, and it was all Black families, parents talking to their kids about the dangers of a police encounter.
Mhm.
Black families. And so like there's like a 12-year-old girl sitting there crying, and they're like, the mom's like, why are you crying? She's like, I don't want my brother to die. I don't want him to die. And the mom's literally saying, I know, honey, I know. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's like like the amount of fear in the community. And I hate to say this though, it's not their fault. That is now what exists because of the media, because of politicians, because of the Hollywood, that there is such fear, absolute real fear. I do not deny that it's real, that there is no solution anymore. Any encounter is now escalated to the point where if you're a minority, that's it, your life is over. You're just, this cop's going to kill you. And the cop is thinking, oh shit, we got riots, we got violence, we got this, we got that. He's on high alert. You're on high alert. Everyone thinks everything's going to escalate.
I mean, any traffic stop I could die. That's the kind of stuff that's pounded in our head on a daily basis. From the beginning of police academy, like, shit, dude, my first day, they're like, watch this video. And it's a cop in Georgia from like the 90s. And this guy comes out and just starts shooting the hell out of him. And it's like, good God, like, I don't want that to happen to me. So my first traffic stop, dude, I am jacked. I'm like, got my gun almost out. I'm like, and it's ingrained in us too, that fear of citizens, but because at any given traffic stop can be the last one you ever do, or this, that, and another. So it kind of goes both ways. Yes, absolutely, it can happen, but the likelihood is slim. Do I have to be alert and ready to go on any given traffic stop? Yes, but I can do that very professionally and courteous. Like, I don't have to be jacked up and like Mr. State Trooper in 1995, guy. Like, it goes both ways. I feel like, it is ingrained in your head. Officer safety, officer safety, officer safety. And yes, all those things are important, but it's never talked about how you talk to people and stuff like that. Like, I feel like it can go both ways. I feel like, I try to look at things from both perspectives.
No, that's important. That's absolutely important.
It is like ingrained in you. Like, any call you go to could be your last call. All this doom and gloom is like, fuck, man. Like, I don't want to
healthy mentally. That's not mentally healthy either.
And it's gotten better. On our shift, we listen to like motivational speakers and stuff like that. We listen to Jocko, Simon Sinek, Eric Thomas, stuff like that. We kind of get pumped up to go to work. But there's other shifts, they like walk out and they're like heads hanging. They're like, fuck, I'm about to go get killed today. Like, here we go. And I've been on shifts like that, and it's tough. And that's part of our culture too, is, in law enforcement, it's like, this could be you, these cops were shot here. And like, yes, it could, absolutely. But like, God, I can't go to work like that every day, because it just puts you in a bad mental mindset of talking and communicating and dealing with people,
and leading into escalation.
Yeah, like if you're already at like DEFCON 8, and then like you stop somebody and they give a little bit of resistance, you're like DEFCON 10, because at briefing you just watched where this guy did the exact same thing, and then he ended up shooting the cop. You're like, oh, I just saw this. So, like I said, I try to look from all angles. It's we're not completely innocent in some of the things that happens. We kind of put it on ourselves a little bit. I'm sure you probably haven't ever heard any. I feel like I have a very unique perspective.
No, I'm actually glad you're sharing. Look, I'm not a critic of police. I actually talk to a lot of police, and a lot of them are very open and admit where there's faults. I think that's the beauty of law enforcement, by the way. All these people write us and say like, well, if the good cops just spoke out against the bad cops, I'm like, listen, I'm out there interviewing the good cops. They are speaking out. The number one people who put IA complaints are other cops. Like, that's a false narrative. I want to put that to rest. We have one right here. We have an officer right here who's literally talking about the problems that exist, literally calling out other cops. Every interview I do, the cops are willing to do this. So stop saying that. It's just not you. I'm talking to the people listening.
We're quick and fast to like throw another cop under the bus that are doing things wrong. Like, and if it's on the media, I'm like, ooh, like when I saw the Derek Chauvin stuff, I was like, oh yeah, he fucked up. Like that dude needs to fucking go away. Like, wow, that's bad. And like anything that's plastered on the media, I'm like, I'm like, watch it. I'm like, all right, let me get everything else. Let me wait a couple of days before I develop an opinion. All right, yeah, they screwed up. Like that dude screwed up bad, and we are quick, because it makes us all look bad. One bad guy makes all law enforcement look bad.
Well, that's the absurdity.
Yeah.
Again, people can't disconnect 60 million police interactions from one bad. They're like, well, I can show you 10 videos. I'm like, congratulations, you can show me 10 videos. 60 million interactions, 10 videos. Do the math. That's a one in what? Wait, that's 10? 10 videos, 60 million interactions, a 1 in 6 million chance?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there's a 1 in 6 million chance of that happening to you. Congratulations.
That's not very high.
No.
Yeah. It's the strangest thing. And like I said, we are quick, very quick. And even when it comes to, it's what's worse for me is like the officer safety stuff. Like we're quick to throw something, but like, what's that cop doing? I would never do that. Why is their officer safety so bad? So it's even more than just them doing wrong things. It's officer safety. It's anything. Like we are quick to not necessarily throw them under the bus, but to criticize,
It's really interesting. Ilhan Omar was once asked, like, are you willing to condemn like the acts in like radical Islam? There was like some terrorist attacks and she didn't comment on it. And she was like, why should I have to comment on it? She's like, it's not my obligation to like speak out. And she was heavily defended by the very people who hold that completely different standard to policing. In other words, like, so she doesn't have to comment when it's a religious thing, but a police officer has to comment because one officer out of 900,000 did something out of 60 million police interactions. Now all officers have to comment I'm like, it gets to a point where you do, because the media and everyone makes it seem like this is everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's just like a really weird, I don't understand kind of how to fix it. And I'm like, I'm trying to always bring attention to it. And,
we're it's been pounded in my head from the beginning. We're held to a higher standard, and that standard keeps getting higher and higher. We're expected to be like freaking Superman, be able to do it all, fix it all, be bulletproof, and always do the right thing no matter what. And yes, that's the standard that we all wish to live up to, but we just can't. We're people. We're not Kryptonians. So it's a strange thing. It's a strange time.
Let me ask you one last question, and then I'll let you go. I won't take up more of your time.
I'll sit here all day with you.
Do you think, you said that the pendulum swings and it swings back? Do you see the pendulum swinging back, or do you not see it swinging back in this case?
Not anytime soon. Not anytime soon, unfortunately. It's going to have to get worse. As bad as it is, I feel like it's going to have to get a lot worse before it gets better. So in my career, we started out where we were taking people to jail. If you're a bad guy, watch out, we were coming for you, doing police work. And then it swung this way, and it was like, oh, yep, we're not doing anything. I had a sergeant point blank come in. He's like, hey, can you come meet me? I was like, yes, sir. So I went and met him. He's like, why are you doing all these traffic stops? And this was, 3 or 4 years ago. So what do you mean, sir? He goes, you're the only person doing traffic stops taking people to jail. I was like, this is what I signed up to do. He's like, well, nobody else is doing it. I was like, yeah, but that's okay. I don't need to be like everybody else. And he kind of like was astonished that I was still doing stuff like that. And so then the pendulum swung back a little bit in my career. Last year when we got our new chief, his son's was a sergeant on my shift. Now he's my lieutenant. He was like, Dan, he goes, I want you to do what you used to do. I want you to take people to jail again. I was like, all right. So I went and sat down with our assistant chief. He's like, yeah, I love that shit. Take people to jail, do your job, do a good job. He goes, if you get complaints and you didn't do anything wrong, I got you, you're going to be fine. I was like, cool, got it. So from March until May of last year, even in the pandemic, I was taking somebody to jail at least 1 to 2 every night for felony narcotics, guns, running, all that good stuff. And then now the pendulum's kind of swung back, and they're like, yeah, like let's pump the brakes a little bit. It's really weird. I don't see it happening anytime soon, just because of the culture of our nation right now. They don't want us doing that.
I want you arresting people who have illegal firearms and narcotics.
No, they don't want us doing that.
That's going to end well for everyone, apparently.
So I think part of the problem is people can't understand that, you know, these guns and these drugs, like they're all part of, sex trafficking. They're all part of, any kind of like that,
Homicide, everything.
like drugs. In my opinion, the drugs is kind of like the root of all other crime. People go and rob the gas station because they want to buy their crack rock, or they want to do this, or they want to do that, because so they can get their drugs. They have these guns because this drug dealer is mad at that drug dealer. A lot of crime, not all crime. There's obviously like theft, and domestic stuff that's not part of that. But like our major crimes, our burglaries and stuff like that, I feel like the root of that is drugs and narcotics. But I don't think people quite understand, that stuff is important, because our war on drugs, or whatever you would want to call it, is stops other crime. That you can't. There's no telling how many times. So what people don't quite understand, even if we're not stopping people and taking people to jail, our presence in those neighborhoods where that kind of stuff is happening is a crime deterrent. Me just sitting there in my car, just chilling, stops people from crime. Cops, and that's part of one of the problems I have with some cops is they go find their hiding spot and they don't move until they're dispatched somewhere. Go sit somewhere where people are going to see you, because that's going to stop crime. That's going to be a deterrent. But yeah, that pendulum, it's going to have to get worse, a lot worse, before it gets any better, because people don't make the connection of us being proactive, us doing traffic stops, us, stopping people, how that deters other crimes. Just having my lights on. When I first started, my lieutenant would be like, "Hey, Dan, University Avenue is a main thoroughfare through downtown and midtown where all our bars are. A lot of shootings, not a lot, but shootings and stuff like that happens." He goes, "I just want you going up and down University Avenue, stopping cars with your lights on, because it's a crime deterrent." But now they won't let us. Not that they won't let us. Now they don't ask us to do it like they used to. So it's going to be a while. I feel like I keep kind of getting off on tangents. I'm trying to reel it back into your question.
No, it's very good. Like people need to hear it, because in the end of the day, who's going to suffer? The minority communities that people claim they want to help. That's where you're going to see skyrocketing crime rates and homicide. And it's not even, again, it's not a question on whether that's going to happen. It's proven. There's so many studies on it. The Ferguson effect, right after the Mike Brown, was that the Mike Brown shooting, where after that they did minimal policing, and homicide rates went up like 40% in 1 year, and then again the next year they skyrocketed.
So our agency really pulled back a lot on proactive policing. We had a month or two in there where I was one of the only people doing it last year at one point, because like I enjoy it. It's fun to me. I like playing cops and robbers, basically. Our homicide rate last year, we had more shootings last year than I ever remember. I've been there 8.5, almost 9 years, and we had more shootings last year. And it was during COVID, man. Like, it was the craziest thing. Like, everybody was supposed to be home in quarantine, but we had more shootings and more people shot than I've ever remembered any 2 years combined. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So if people just don't realize that.
They will. And I think they do realize it. And I think they're just bought so much into this narrative. It's interesting because I've tried to talk about like increase in crime rates. I try and talk about, I've actually tried to talk about black on black crime and things like that. And I'm like, if we look, this is all part of the same issue. You're looking at like higher rates of police interactions, higher rates of police shootings. That's happening. It's not happening necessarily because of racism. You have to look at the fact that there's a 5 times higher homicide rate, 20 times higher crime rate. There's, there's so many factors that come into play. I'm like, we have to be able to look at disproportionate crime and say that's going to lead to disproportionate policing.
So I called a friend of mine when all the Derek Chauvin stuff happened, the George Floyd stuff happened last year. I called a friend of mine because that was what it was talked about. More cops are in these black neighborhoods and everything. And I called my friend. I'm in tears. He was a friend of mine that I did Survivor with. He lives up in Atlanta. I was like, Davey, I was like, am I doing something wrong? I was like, I do traffic stops. I take people to jail. I'm in these black areas, these black neighborhoods more than I'm anywhere else. I was like, but damn it, Davey. I was like, I don't decide where the crime is. I don't decide. I'm in tears crying on the phone to this guy. I was like, am I doing something wrong? I was like, because I don't feel like I am, but it made me question myself. And that was a tough time for me. It was, like a month. I was just eating up about it. Because of all the stuff on the media. I was like, I need somebody to talk to. I was like, somebody that's not involved in law enforcement, somebody that knows me relatively well. I was like, let me call him. And he's like, Dan, he goes, like you said, you don't decide where the crime is. He goes, do you treat people poorly? I was like, no. I was like, I have people thank me when I take them to jail sometimes. He's like, then you're not doing anything wrong. We don't decide where the crime is. As much as people think we may, we don't decide. We decide where we go based on where the crime is.
Mm-hmm.
And all these agencies, these days and times have all these different analytics and these computer softwares that just tell you where all this crime is happening. And that's where we go. We don't just be like, you know what? That neighborhood's full of black kids. We're going to go there and we're going to stop. We're going to go take care of them. No, that's not what happens. Okay, that neighborhood's where the crime's at. That's where we're going to go. That's what we do.
Do you know the saddest statistic in our country that not one politician, no one talks about, no organization? The leading cause of death for Black men between the ages of 14 to 49 is homicide by another Black male. It is the only racial group in all of America where the leading cause of death is homicide. If you're a 15-year-old white kid or Hispanic kid, you're most likely to die from like a traumatic incident, meaning like a car accident, you're playing with friends, you fall, hit your head, some kind of trauma. It is only in that. Now, the reason I think people are defensive to talk about it is because every time I've talked about it, they're like, you're trying to dismiss other problems, or you're trying to say that Black people are more prone to criminality, or you're trying to make it a race thing. And I'm like, no, what I'm trying to say is that I acknowledge that this is a problem, but I also acknowledge that we got here because of failures of society along the way, breaking down of the two-parent household, a history of Jim Crow, a history of racism, a history of oppression. So I'm actually trying to bring attention to the history that exists that got us here. I can't even do that because I can't even talk about the problem without being called part of the problem. You're denying police issues because you're trying to divert the attention here. I'm like, let that statistic sink in. The leading cause of death is homicide. It's the only group in America, and no one talks about it, and no one wants to deal with it. And if you think that that's not going to cause a disproportionate amount of interactions with police, then you're ignoring how statistical realities work, right? Yeah. So to me, it's a massive tragedy, and we can't fix a community if we can't talk about a problem in a community.
I mean, it's so different than a marriage. If you're not willing to talk about the problem, you're not going to fix the problem, or a relationship or anything. You have to be willing to talk about it. That's never knew that.
No, and you would think that we would care about those lives. Like that's what I understand. Like, how does it make you a racist person to care about a life and say, I don't care about the color of the life. I care about the life. It's a 15-year-old kid. I care about the life. I'm going to do what I can to save more 15 to 35-year-old kids and men. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. If you want to call me a racist for it, that's fine. But the solution, by the way, to those homicides, the real solution, and it's proven, is increased policing. Is more aggressive. I hate to say it. It's more aggressive policing. It's a proven fact in every study that has analyzed it is what brings that rate of homicide down. And then obviously you have to do other things. You have to do community outreach. You have to get more opportunities. You have to invest more money into those communities. There's tons of things to do beyond just, but removing police from those communities increases the crime rate in those communities.
Worse. Yeah, I could see that. Damn. Can you send me this? Where you got that from? That's fantastic.
On the CDC website, I think, FBI website. It's a very well-known. Here, I'll look for it after we're done. But I mean, it's a pretty surprising statistic, and it's very troubling. I mean,
that's insane. It's not surprising though.
Here, let me see. Just so I'm leading cause of death of non-Hispanic Black males. If you go by age, homicide accounts for 35% between 1 to 19 years old, which is the number one cause. Homicide accounts for 22 to 44, number one cause. And then after 45, the leading cause. So I'm not 49 years old. I was off by 4 years. It's heart disease after that. So from 1 to 19, it's homicide. From 20 to 44 is homicide, the leading cause. This is by the CDC. I'm on the CDC website right now. The number 2 cause is unintentional injuries, which is the leading cause you would find in other groups. And then after that, it's things like suicide and cancer. That's down the list. I mean, you're talking about 35% of the people who die between the age of, if you did an average between the age of 1 to 44, if you're a Black male, roughly 30% to 32% leading cause of death of all the deaths that happen is homicide.
That's insane. And so in that, and how you talked about a small portion of solving that, it goes back into what I was saying, where my sergeants and lieutenants would be like, hey, can you ride up and down this area with your lights on? The more aggressive policing. And it's that those lights are a deterrent. You see those lights, you're like, no, not tonight. Another night. You know, it prevents people from doing things, just seeing it, because they don't want to get caught. They don't want to get in trouble. That fear of punishment, it's no different than a child. You know, kid's not going to do something they're not supposed to do if they know they're going to be punished. So, and that's what people fail to realize. And that's just kind of our culture as a whole. You know, people don't, you know, we have all these kids that's a whole nother topic, but that's like a parenting topic.
What we have created is a culture that cares more about a narrative than it does about truth.
Yep.
So if the narrative is telling them police are bad, they care more about standing up and virtue signaling and justice for this, justice for that. But then 1,000 people could die in that very same community from entirely preventable causes.
So I have been seeing things where people have been speaking out about the Black Lives Matter people, that group and organization, how they don't care unless it is something that can boost their organization. I've seen a few articles about that. I don't read a lot of the news, but I try to keep up with stuff that's relevant to me. And I've been seeing that. There was one person in specific. I don't know if it was the Breonna Taylor mom or somebody that happened.
It was,
like that.
I think the Breonna Taylor, and even the George Floyd's family was like, "Where's the money? Why aren't you giving us any of the money?"
Yeah, why aren't you helping us? Yeah, it's insane. But I think that's a good step in the right direction. That even the people that their families are victims of these horrendous incidents, they're speaking out and be like, these guys are like full of shit. They're not helping us. Like, they did it. They publicized. They made their marches. They destroyed stuff, and then they bounce. And that's all they care about.
Mm-hmm.
Creating more chaos.
It's tragic.
It's a crazy world, man.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. It was really great.
Dude, thanks for having me. Like, I don't get to talk like this very much. It was nice to have these discussions with you.
No, I think it's really important for people to hear and see police officers like yourself who, just like there's the videos of the other stuff, the more we can get these videos out, the more people can say, okay, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to kind of hear more views, and hopefully that happens. So thanks for taking the time. I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, man. Anytime you want me back, I'm about it.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you.